So tonight we wanted to kind of give you an update on where we are with Centennial, number one. Number two, give you an update on the health of the club in terms of membership and operations and how things are working today. And then number three, which is something we've been working pretty hard on over the winter, is a new mission strategic plan. Go over the focus group results that we had last fall and kind of show you the direction we think we ought to take the club as we go forward. So the agenda is here. Most of the state of the club information is going to be Chad and Juan. Then we'll split up on the strategic plan with a couple other board members who've been very engaged in the process. And we'll wrap up then with some discussion about bylaw changes that we think need to take place and how we're going to socialize those over the summer, and then bring the club back together at the end of the summer to probably take a pretty significant vote on how we change the bylaws. So that's the summary of the evening. I will add that the strategic direction document is on the table over there, and it's also going to be posted in the member section of the website, so you'll have access to. And we'll put the slides up there, and then we're recording this, so others that aren't able to make it here can watch the presentation on their own. So you want to take it from here, Juan?
Everybody hear me okay? Great. How's everybody doing today? Good. Great. So for those who don't know me, I'm relatively new to the club. My name is Juan Vegas. I am the new controller here. Stop. There we go. The new controller here at Meridian Hills. Historically, Meridian Hills has had a controller, but it's been outsourced. Sometime last year, the board, finance committee, and that being said, as we get closer to our golf course reopening, we have seen a bit of a bounce back in our membership. Some of the numbers you're going to see here are actually as of March month end. We've now got some updated information from April. Currently, our golf category is full, and we have a 6-member wait list. Our athletic category is currently at 168 members with a cap of 175. So we have an opportunity there to grow that just a little bit more before we have to move over to a wait list. Definitely manageable with the new campus that's coming up here, or rather a new West campus that's going to be finished sometime this year. And lastly, our clubhouse category is currently at a 5-year low. That is happening just through natural attrition. We don't allow members to now join in the clubhouse category. All the members in the clubhouse category are downgrades from either resident golf or athletic currently. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch on, we have a lot of maybe funky key performance indicators in the club business. I'm not going to bore you to death and go over every single one of them, but there is one that I think is important to touch on today. That's going to be our full member equivalence. It's literally just a way for us as managers, as a board, to look at membership in different periods of time, in an apples to apples manner, if you will. So what does full member equivalent mean? It's a simple calculation. We take the operating dues the club has received, and we divide them by the operating dues cost for a resident golf member, effectively giving you the equivalent dues that you have for the highest level of membership. Today, we are 569 full member equivalents, and we are forecasting by the end of the fiscal year to be at 573, which would actually be a 5-year high for Meridian Hills. So this is just a visual representation of what we just discussed. On the right-hand side, you can see how those categories have somewhat shifted over time. But on the bottom left, that blue line is our full member equivalents over the last 5 years, stay relatively flat. So even though we've had major shifts in membership categories, our full member equivalent has stayed relatively similar over time. So I thought this chart here kind of gives a better representation of how we started this fiscal year and where we are trending towards today. We don't see the month of April in here, but once again, we had a positive net number of membership. We started at 706, saw ourselves drop all the way to 699 actually. And today, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say we're 7 higher, so we are at 722 members, 23 members. If I could do math, that'd be great. Okay. So one thing that's interesting about this chart, traditionally, February and March are relatively slow months for new members. The reason that we saw growth in those 2 months was very strategic in nature. Board, Chad, membership committee, and Kelly identified that all of you here invested drastically into this club. And for that reason, this club is now with a higher end, if you will. We're going to have better assets, better amenities. And for that reason, it should be a little bit more expensive to join this club than it was historically. So the decision was made at the end of March that the initiation fees would increase for golf by $12,500, resident golf, and $10,000 for athletic and our junior golf category. There was some individuals who had interest in joining the club, but we're waiting to have the course open and maybe not pay a few months worth of dues. When that change was made, the calculus changed a little bit for those individuals, and they jumped the gun and they joined the club. Once again, positive trends for the club. So let's shift over to the operating performance of the club. It is best practice in a 501c7 non-for-profit country club, which is what Meridian Hills is, to end the year within 2 percentage points of break even. Currently, we are seeing a positive operating performance, slightly below what we were budgeting, trending in the right direction. Ultimately, our goal, and it will continue to be our goal, will be to break even in operations at the end of the fiscal year. We've had some challenges this year. There's no need to get into what those are specifically, but I think all of you know that the club hasn't had a traditional year since 2019. We had the pandemic, then we shifted into Centennial, and that just makes budgeting sometimes a little bit difficult, especially when you outsource the department head in accounting. So we've been working through some growing pains, if you will, but today we still currently feel very confident, and we forecast that we will end our fiscal year within that 2 percentage points of break even. All right, so excluding the Centennial project, today we have working capital of $762,000 and current ratio of 1.3. So why does this matter? Working capital greater than 0 or a current ratio greater than 1 tells us that the club is able to meet its obligations in the short term, which is, again, a positive thing for the club. And shifting over to capital, this year the club changed how it looked at capital as far as how we funded capital and how strategic we were about that. I'm not going to get into the details because Mr. Ackerman will dive a little deeper into that. But the board got a little bit creative about how we brought those funds in to begin the fiscal year. The board chose to reappropriate some equity that we had from the sale of a property that the club owned so that it can be used for capital. There was an assessment at the end of the last fiscal year for all the membership of $500, and we implemented a $50 capital dues fee. That has brought in $936,000 to date, or rather as of the end of March, and we've spent $446,000 of that. 56% of that has been to service the debt that we have from the Centennial project, but the remainder of that has been really reinvested back into the club. You might ask yourself, well, how did we do that? We've done it through some asset replacement here. You may have noticed there's been some repairs to some concrete out by the front. We did have to make some repairs for fire hydrant out by the parking lot. We were running into some water pressure issues and we were out of compliance. There's a tent that you see usually every year out by the pro shop that we used to rent, that we've decided to purchase, and will create an operational efficiency where it'll pay for itself within 2 years. We had some minor HVAC repairs that we had to make here at the club. We fixed the men's sauna. We installed some new security cameras, and there's still more to come. So just to close things out, just wanted to say that it's a really great time to be a member here at Meridian Hills, as well as to be a staff member at Meridian Hills. This is a fantastic board who is putting in a lot of work, not only to understand the club industry, but to make this the best club possible for its membership. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dye on some Centennial project updates.
Thanks, Juan. It's been, you should be very thankful for the changes Juan's made just in this short time. It's been remarkable. We've outsourced payroll, for example. We've automated our payables. The infrastructure is much improved from where we've been in the past. So we owe him a debt of gratitude to get us moving in the right direction. So in terms of Centennial, I'd start with how we funded things, because I think in the past in these presentations I haven't focused enough on that. So the top line, the total funding that we've made is about $16 million. We think where we stand now, based on the last assessment we passed, we think we're going to have a surplus in the $200,000 range. And I'll go through the uses side of this in a second, but you can see the sources are the $8 million in assessment. We used $1.8 million from cash we had back in 22 to get started on the project, 21 actually. We refinanced our debt. The net debt financing is about $5.3 million, and then we rolled the old debt into that number. There's on top of that number. We have interest income driven by the folks that paid over time on the assessment, so that gets us to about $16 million with our surplus noted here. So here, I broke this down in between what is on the golf course versus everything else. The next slide gets a little complicated, so I'll give you a heads up, because we've moved things around so much in terms of how we've adjusted the project. The biggest issue, as you recall, was the excess cost with the irrigation system. That was both labor and materials, drove that substantially. The $2.9 million number there was a number that was derived in 2021. The course improvements, we went from 2.7, and then we revised the estimate when we added the additional assessment to $3.3 million. What we've done to bring that number down is we purchased most of the course materials directly as opposed to through the contractor. And it's interesting the way that material bill is determined is through GPS tracking. They actually go out and measure the size of the bunker, then you pay per square foot of the mounding around the bunker. So it's a pretty scientific way that they come up with the amount. That surprised me. I wasn't aware of that. And Jared can talk in great detail about how that works. So at the end of the day, with Jared's team working pretty hard and buying the materials directly, we're saving a little bit of money on the course improvements. So all in, we're still over where we expected to be back in 21, but we brought it back into under where we expected to be when we did the last assessment. So here's where it gets a little messy. And this is driven entirely by the decision we made to not build the lodge on the driving range. And it's driven by the drainage requirement that was unaccounted for when the project was first designed. So the clubhouse, snack bar, fitness center, which were all completed early in the project, came in a little bit better than our assessed amount. The lodge was removed, so you can see how we took that out. The $1,370,000 was the final number to provide the drainage for not only the project we're doing now, but it will allow us in the future to put a hitting bays on the north side of the drive in the driving range, should we have the desire to do that in the future. The pool came in reasonably consistent. To make this revised number is significant, and it really represents building the paddle facility where we are going to have a lodge in between the four courts. And you should really compare these two numbers to that. That's really more of a real comparison, but I wanted to point out that, make sure everybody understood that the lodge number was reinvested into the Rackets campus. Everything else, these, we have design costs for the lodge across the street that we own, so should we have a situation where we want to go build those, we can. And then we still have about $150,000 of contingency remaining there. So that's the rundown on cost-wise where we land with Centennial. In terms of a schedule update, the best news is Jared's been working pretty hard and his crew, and we're going to be able to open Memorial Day weekend, which is about so that's about a week early. You'll be getting information on how we're going to manage that and manage the demand for tee times. We'll probably do some shotguns to get everybody out that wants to play. So that's I will not be there on Saturday, May 25th, because I'm going to Alaska. and I have a red eye coming home that night, so you want to see me. We are, the pickle courts, we've had some concerning weather. I'm a little concerned about hitting the end of May, but if we get what we hope we get in terms of weather, they'll be able to lay the asphalt next Tuesday. Is that right, Chad?
Yes.
And that will give us, the asphalt has to cure for about 3 weeks before the coating can go down. So that's you'll see a lot of activity, and then you won't see much going on over there while the cure happens. The paddle courts should be a little easier schedule to hit. We've got more time before the paddle season. And we're also pushing, if you were out in the parking lot today, there's a lot of drainage apparatus that's protected off by a temporary fence. That work will start to get installed, and the parking lot will be a mess next week, so be warned. But then there'll also be a detention pond that we're trying to reshape and hide as much as possible that'll be left of the ladies' tee on 5. But roughly where that fence is gives you a sense of where that's likely to be. So, I'm happy to take Centennial questions now if you have them. If not, we'll move into the meat of the evening. Yeah?
What was the reason we had to put the detention pond in?
Well, if we want to expand onto the driving range, that required that pond, and we decided that it would be best to do that while we get everything else torn up.
So it's not immediate?
It'll be there, but it's not really a huge issue in terms of solving our campus drainage.
Is any summer parking issues of concern?
I think it'll be more springtime in the next couple of weeks. Do you think that? So yeah, and you'll be walking long farther than you want some days, and we'll be parked up front on other days. The one thing I should add, the other disruption that you're going to see in the next couple of weeks is the driving range. The drainage line runs along the back part of the hitting area on the range. So it'll tear up the asphalt there, which will be replaced. So you will see some disruption there where we'll have you moved up front on the range to hit balls. And that'll be heavy activity for probably 2 or 3 days. Anything else? Okay. So first I want to thank John Ackerman, Terry Bendis, Steve McGovern, and Greg Brazzi. They were the group that took a lot of their time over the winter to help put this together. We hired McMahon Group, who I think you've those of you who are at our meetings in the past have met them. They led us through this process starting in January. They were very helpful, very experienced. I would hire them again if we had a similar project. And so the way it worked is many of you have spent some time with them in the focus groups. They came back to us. They also did a survey of the last 2 or 3 boards so they could get the board's perspective on what they felt like their experience was in terms of governance. And we put together what you'll see in these initiatives coming up based on the member feedback, their experience at other clubs, a lot of reading bylaws of other clubs. That's really a good way to go to sleep. So that's kind of the overview of how we operated with the McMahon team. So the focus group feedback is interesting. I found it interesting and not a lot of surprises, to be honest. One, really, for me. But there's clear that there's a desire by the membership to be the preferred high-end country club in central Indiana. And that sentiment didn't matter which focus group you were in, because they were kind of separated by age and member class. But that was clearly the primary message, was that we feel as if we should be the higher end family club in Indianapolis. Number 2 is the member experience, given that preferences, needs to be best in class. It needs to be, I think it's improved dramatically, but I think because we perceive ourselves that way, we also expect better member experience than most other clubs. This one kind of surprised me, and I think it was a good thing, is the number of people who said we lacked a mission statement. And personally hadn't thought about it too much like that, but it really proved to be a really good exercise, and we'll show it to you here in a minute. I'm pretty happy with what we came up with. The next issue is the recognition that we have a wide variety of ages and purpose for membership. It's very much a multi-generational club. It's not a golf club. It's a family club. There's a lot of folks here that have 3rd generation members, and that's something we need to recognize, as our club has certainly gotten younger over the recent past, but we also need to recognize the fact that we have a lot of differing demands and ideas of what the club should be. There's a lot of comment about the board being too operational and too much focused on the day-to-day things and not in the long term. And then the last one was trying to have more transparency, not only in operations and finance and everything, about what their memberships, how they've invested in as members of the club. So in terms of self-assessment, there were really two things that came out significantly. One was getting orientation right for not only the board, but committee members. And we've got a pretty good handle on where we think that needs to go. And then the biggest was the long-term financial stability and how we govern, how our governance needs to address how we take care of our balance sheet over the next however many years. So after that, we worked through this pretty significantly to capture what we think our mission should be. And, we use the word premier on purpose because we think that's what we are and want to be. It's important that people are here for a long time. They make great friends here, and it becomes a meaningful part of their life. So that's really what we're trying to capture here. And we added the staff piece on here because we think it's important that if you have a dedicated staff and long-term committed staff, that shows through in terms of how the membership experience translates. So in terms of vision, this is more action-oriented. And again, what we want to do is have an outstanding family club experience. We want it to be the place you want to come home to. You want to feel like this is your second home and where you want to be. And we want to recognize that we want to celebrate not only we've been here 100 years, but create new ideas and new traditions as we go along. So underneath this, we worked with the McMahon team to identify, based on the focus groups, based on the mission, vision, what our core values were as a club. The first thing we put on here was transparency. I think, having been members of other clubs, I think having more transparency leads people to be more engaged and understand what the optics and operations of the club really are. We want to have quality experiences. There's going to be a really good one on Saturday for the Kentucky Derby, so hope you can come to that. But those are the kind of things we want to keep creating and having people enjoy. We want to have an engaged staff. I think when you come to this place, we want people to know their name, them to know your name, you to know their name, and have an engaging exchange from a staff perspective. And then that, in our view, drives the high service levels. We have employees that want to be here, they enjoy the company, the people they've met here, and we want to continue that. And then this place to belong again is back to wanting this to be kind of your second home. People want to be here. They come here just because they want to hang out, not necessarily for dinner, but they want to see their friends. And then the last issue is the location. We're in a pretty unique spot in the city in terms of we're fortunate to be able to live in this zip code. And if you look at our zip code range, it's really three. It's South Carmel, it's Williams Creek, and it's just north. So we want to take advantage of the fact that we want to be the place to be for people that are near us. So I'll walk over the objectives that we came up with, which are 6. The first one is how do we be more strategic from a governance perspective and in turn empower our management team to run the operations of the club. The second one is how we develop membership and a culture around that membership. The third one is our member experience. The fourth one is how do we steward our resources and manage the club financially. The next one is always making sure we have a long-term facility master plan so we can manage our stewardship against that plan. And then the last is making sure we have the best staff we can have and we retain those folks. So those are the bit broader objectives. A few other folks will come up here and talk about some of them. I'm going to start off with governance. And so this slide's really intended not so much in the weeds, but to distinguish how we're looking at our board committees. And we've really split them into committees that will be board-oriented. That's finance, membership, and governance. And then the operating committees will be Chad's day-to-day responsibility, and he'll focus on how we operate the 3 main parts of our campus, which is golf, rackets, and food and beverage. So how do we get there? There's a few other nuances to this that we'll be addressing. The board committees, we're going to create what we call a board policy manual. Probably the best one I read was the one that Chad introduced me from Carmel Country Club in Charlotte. But what we do is go through and define the role of each committee, what kind of person we're looking for to be on that committee. And I think it will become kind of the framework with how we operate all these committees going forward. So we have a fair amount of work to do. We'll steal some info too, but that will be a breathing, living document by this fall, and we'll share it with everybody. A couple other things, and these are related to what we'll probably recommend in bylaws as we get through the summer. One is have a two-year term for the president. It's really difficult to be effective over just a single year, and I think that's important. Allow a board member to sit for 2 consecutive 3-year terms, so you can extend that experience to people. A slight shift is currently we have liaisons from the board to the committees and then the separate committee chairman. We're recommending that a board person be the committee chair because it becomes a little confusing for what the role of the liaison is and what the role of the chairman is. We are going to require in the bylaws that we have an annual set of goals and objectives from an operating perspective that are published so the members understand what the issues are. They'll be a focus of the board in the next year. Our plan is to complete that once the new board is seated, which is in November. Then the old board and the new board work together to come up with those and have a better roadmap for transition as we move forward. So those are the other significant changes on the governance side. The most significant one, I think, is currently we have a structure where the past 5 presidents form a past presidents council, and they then become a group that appoints members to the membership committee and members of the board. I've gotten a lot of feedback about that not being a broad enough group to continue perpetuating similar kind of board thinking. And in an effort to get more broad-based thinking on the board, we've come up with a model where it's a governance committee, and we have 7 members on that serve 5-year terms, and they aren't necessarily board members. They're more likely to be perhaps past board members, get a more intergenerational mix of people on that committee that will then nominate the annual slate of board members. They'll appoint all the members to the other committees, so there's a broader view of how we get there. Right now, I think it's much more casual and spontaneous in terms of how people are moved on to committees. They'll maintain a list of members who've expressed interest so that you can, as the committees evolve, you'll have a list of folks you can turn to. And the tough one is when you have people that are on a committee but aren't really functioning. So this group will be responsible for talking to those folks and saying, hey, maybe this isn't for you. So that's probably the biggest change on here in terms of trying to move away from our current board structure. I kind of went through these. And I didn't hit on the fact that as part of the bylaws, this will be an edict that the board maintain a strategic plan. And they can build on this one and start over, but our intent is to be more transparent and have more visible stated goals that the membership sees. The last couple are more housekeeping, I think. One is we have this audit requirement that we have to have the audit done by the annual meeting. That gives us less than 6 weeks typically. So the last day we can have our annual meeting today is the 15th of November. So we'll probably try and push that out. We've had some trouble with our auditor in terms of cost and performance, so that we'll probably have a little more flexibility in hiring somebody else with this. And the other one is allow a spouse of a member to serve on committees and board. Right now, if you're not the member, then we've had people transfer their membership among spouses so they could serve on a board, and we think that's just a little out of touch. So I'll turn this over to John. He's going to take us through our stewardship plan.
Hey, good evening. I'm John Ackerman. I know a lot of you. I don't know a lot of you. I've been a member for many years, but I'm serving in my 2nd year on the board and just having a great time. This has been a really fun strategic planning process. I hope that you're enjoying it as much as it's been. We've had fun working on it, and I'm I'm very excited about it. I hope you're excited about it as well when we're done. So I've been kind of given a difficult task tonight. I've got some hard truths to present. I'm hoping I won't get peached after all this. But we're going to talk about a new financial strategy that we hope to put it in place. And I want to do that without casting any dispersions or criticisms of prior boards on how the clubs have managed financially. I don't mean to do that in any way whatsoever, because the prior boards are really kind of operating the club in a way that most of the private club industry in our country has been operating for several years. And that approach really focused on setting dues every year based on what competitive clubs are doing, hoping that some initiation fees would come in, and use those two revenue streams to cover the cash operating needs of the club, as well as debt service, and then hope that you had enough left over to take care of repair and maintenance. Obviously, as you'd expect, and I'm sure you'd all agree, sometimes that leaves inadequate support for our physical facilities. And also, little flexibility to improve our facilities because there really aren't any reserves being built. So with that as background, our intent is to use this plan to develop a strategy that, number one, funds operations that in a way that is really consistent with the vision and the mission that Dennis just talked about, and that's to be a premier full-service club in town. Secondly, I think we've also mentioned in prior meetings that we conducted a capital reserve study that shows that we have a lot of needs to be met in the next 10 years just to maintain our current facility. Our hope is that the due structure will allow us to do that without having to have any surprise assessments along the way. And third, obviously, we're completing the Centennial project. It was funded by assessments. We also, as Dennis mentioned, we had to increase our debt load. We had some remaining debt from the prior project, and we actually added another almost $5.8 million to it, keeping our debt payments at $500,000 a year. And trying to keep those payments where they were so they didn't have to increase dues means that we have a very large maturity payment in 2031, $6.5 million. So we're going to hope to build some reserves to cover that as we go forward. And obviously, the last thing is to try to remove our reliance on initiation fees to meet our budget so that we can start to build some reserves so that we have flexibility with the addition of maybe some assessments or long-term debt, but we have more flexibility if the club chooses to take on new projects. So the next two slides are really intended to demonstrate graphically kind of how we've operated in the past, and then how we're going to try to follow club best practices going forward. So historically, Meridian Hills has really had two sources of revenues. I just mentioned operating dues and initiation fees. Every year we budget our revenues using these two sources of income to cover the cash operating expenses as well as our debt service. And then really as a third priority, figure out what we could do to repair the things that were broken during the year. Since there's no reserves accumulating, anything such as an aspirational project like the Centennial project would have to we'd have to fund it through increasing our debt or through assessments. The next slide, though, talks about what's going on as far as best practices. The first line, we'll call it operating dues, and that's just really will be set to cover our cash needs as well as, or based on our cash needs, both including labor, food and beverage, utilities, things like that. As you know, we just implemented a capital dues line. The intent of the capital dues structure is to cover planned asset replacement cost as well as cover our existing debt load. And then third, the last three things there, initiation fees, assessments, and debt, would be a conscious decision that we can make to make any aspirational improvements that the membership decides are priorities. So that's the strategy. Now your question, I suppose, probably is, what are the numbers? Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to show those to you tonight. We are actively looking at a lot of different scenarios, and our plan is to share those with you in August. But for perspective, here's some of the things that we are facing. Number one, fully depreciated asset base. As we talked about before we did this capital reserve study, it indicates that we need to spend $1.5 million a year for the next 10 years really just to maintain what we have. As we mentioned before, we just implemented a capital dues structure last year, $50 a month. That's generating about $400,000 a year. So that's well short of the $1.5 million that we really need to get to, but it's at least a step in the right direction. Secondly, we have significant debt requirements. As I said, our current debt service is $500,000 a year. And again, that was structured so those would not increase, so we wouldn't have to increase our dues. But in doing that, we ended up with a large balloon payment due in July of 2031. Next, the other thing that we're dealing with is the fact that we have relied on initiation fees. We rely on initiation fees just to even have a balanced budget. On average, this year as an example, we're relying on over $600,000 initiation fees. Fortunately, as Chad talked about, as Juan talked about, we're going to meet that budget. But think about it from the standpoint, if you go into a recession or a COVID or something like that, you can end up in a pretty naked position. So those are the things that we are trying to get to as we go forward. So what we plan on doing in August, we're going to deliver to you a financial structure that, number one, has break-even budgets, really without reliance on initiation fees. Secondly, we will have a capital due structure. We already have it. We will be looking at that as well. That'll fund the asset replacement needs that we have identified, and also starts to build reserves to cover the debt payment that we have due in 2031. We also will have a plan to fund aspirational projects, whatever we decide to do, through initiation fees, as well as basically build a plan that gives us flexibility and optionality so that as we go forward the next few years, we can make those decisions consciously and not be forced into things that have surprise assessments. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who's going to talk about some other strategic initiatives.
Hi, good evening. My name is Greg Brazzi, and I'd like to cover strategic objective number 3, which is our membership development and culture. Annually review of member numbers and caps in each membership category. This will assure a balance in revenue generation and member access. We'll offer a senior membership category. The membership committee has reviewed the best option and is making its recommendation to the board. There was a lot of discussion about this, and it should be good news for many. The next 3 points I'd like to cover are actually happening. We've added prospective member events and in-person interviews by a member of the membership committee. Mandatory new member orientation, including engagement of sponsors to attend new member receptions. Added management, sponsors, and membership committee to new members' follow-ups. And I'd like to take a minute to recognize Kelly Lettler and the membership committee for bringing the ideas to life of our 36 new members that we brought in this year. Congratulations and thank you so much. We're looking to create new member mixers to engage with the full membership. Our 4th strategic objective is our facility master plan. Tonight you heard a recap of where we stand on the Centennial Project. Additional updates will be forthcoming as we wrap the project up. Following the completion of our current project, the board will form an ad hoc facility master plan committee. This committee will gather member input as well as work with the necessary outside constituents to design a master plan driven by member input and industry trends. Our 5th objective is compelling membership experiences. We want to conduct an annual survey of the membership. We need to consistently get feedback from the membership. We're going to establish focus groups as needed, as we did with the McMahon Group, Food and Beverage, and the Rackets. This has already proven valuable to the board and to management. We want to provide a variety of annual social events and event calendars. I'll build on Dennis. We have the Derby Day and course review party this Saturday, and we'd love to have all of you here. We continued with the club within the club, the book club, the Euchre Club. I believe our next Euchre event is on May 15th. Please sign up if you haven't been there. It is an absolute hoot. And we want to review and update our club technology within the next 5 years, making all of our systems easier to work. And with that, I'll bring Chad up.
Take this off, sorry. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to go over the 6th objective. Before I do, I just want to thank the board of directors, past presidents, those that were involved in helping create this strategic plan. This is not a light task for volunteers to pick up and do in a time in which we are already trying to complete a very large project here on campus. The time and effort that they've put into it has been remarkable. And on top of that, it's going to drive a much better experience for all of you as members moving forward. So thank you again to all of you for the work. I don't think you get thanked enough, but thank you for doing that. last strategic objective that was determined out of the focus groups was staff development and retention. So here we're looking at ways to standardize onboarding and orientation for employees prior to my arrival. The desired experience was not met for a new employee coming on. They were literally fed to the fire and hoped they survived. In today's hospitality market, you will not keep good employees if that's the model that you use. And so we have to change. We did so by hiring an HR manager who understands the law of HR and implements best practices in our industry, as well as works with the rest of our team to be able to create processes necessary to onboard our employees, provide them an orientation, and give them a great place to start and a place to check in with. This has already been in effect and has reaped many benefits thus far, and our culture is getting stronger by the day. Develop and implement training standards for each department. Some departments were better at this than others upon my arrival, and the ones where there's areas that we can grow, we've already taken the steps to be able to do that. This is going to help ensure a much more standard and consistent membership experience when we provide service to you each and every day. Develop and maintain an excellent work culture. Just spoke about the culture here. The one thing that I, as the club's general manager, control over anything else is the culture that we have here at the club. It's by what we allow to happen and what we don't allow to happen. I take that very seriously every day and work to improve the employee culture on a regular basis. Review compensation and benefits package annually to ensure that we are competitive with our market to attract and retain employees. The club space is a unique hospitality niche with unique hospitality professionals that live inside of them. It seems very simple to pull someone from an outside hospitality source and put them in a club. That doesn't always work because they don't always understand the subtle nuances and differences between what a club is and what the public sector is. Having done that, we make sure that we review information that's given to us by CMA, the Club Management Association of America, CFTP, which is the Club Professionals and Financial Technology, or some other acronyms, GCSAA, PGA of America, ACF, and many more. We use their data that they help generate in collecting competitive wage information to help drive and ensure that Meridian Hills remains competitive to retain good staff and to offer competitive salaries and benefits. And then implement an employee satisfaction surveys and use that information to continually improve. There's other things that have gone into this. These are the major key points, but oftentimes I think the true reflection of how I'm doing as a professional, as your general manager, is to ask our staff. If they enjoy working for me, they'll be here every day. And I truly believe that. You can ask them any day you want, but further, we want to take the time to have our employees to be able to fill things out anonymously, turn them in, and for us to be able to review and improve our culture and practices here inside the club. So that takes us through objective number 6. And you can see some of that work, as Greg mentioned, as Dennis mentioned, and as John mentioned, is already in the works. We wasted no time really trying to jump after some of these items and start creating them for the memberships. But a lot of them will take place over the course of the next 5 years. I'm going to go over some key dates coming up. As Dennis had alluded to, one of the biggest changes is to governance. The bylaws are the fundamentals of the club and how we govern ourselves. Having a draft of these revised bylaws to you by July 1st will give you an opportunity to review the document. I know everyone will go home and read it, and we know that won't happen, and we will give you an opportunity to share or to ask some questions over the months of July and August prior to the vote and required approval to change the bylaws. Those sessions will be held very similar to what we've done with the Centennial Project, where we'll set up dates and times for you to come in and ask Dennis, myself, and other board members questions about the club's bylaws and how that may affect the future. The other is August 1st, our plan is to share the 5-year financial plan. As John mentioned, we don't have numbers tonight, and I don't think it would be in anyone's best interest for us to rush through that process. Just having gotten the strategic plan done and develop all of this, we need more time to be able to look at the numbers, analyze, and be able to communicate with the membership better. And August 1st is the date that we plan to have available to share that with you. And last, in September, we'd like to vote on the bylaws, just the bylaws at that particular time. This gets us away from the annual meeting, so there is a purpose behind this, and just focus on the bylaws so that when we also get to the annual meeting, we can just focus on the successes that we've had over the year, talk about some of the challenges, and focus on the future. So with that, Dennis and I will take any questions that you may have regarding the strategic plan.